I was 19 and living in a small town in the middle of a big forest. I loved exploring the woods, going camping, and being outdoors. I wanted to be a park ranger. My dad, who loved the outdoors, taught me how to camp and respect nature. I learned how to build a fire, cook food, and sleep in a tent. I also learned about the different animals and plants in the forest. One summer, I decided to go on a camping trip by myself, deep into the forest. I packed my backpack with everything I needed: a tent, a sleeping bag, pots and pans, and lots of food. I also packed my flashlight, compass, and map. I said goodbye to my family and friends and set off on my adventure. As I walked deeper into the forest, the trees got taller and taller. They formed a green roof above me. The air was full of sounds: leaves rustling, birds chirping, and a stream gurgling nearby. It was getting dark, so I started to look for a place to camp. I found a campsite in a group of old oak trees. They had twisted branches that reached up like the arms of old men. I put up my tent, gathered firewood, and made a simple meal of beans and rice. I sat by the campfire, watching the flames dance and cast shadows on my face. I felt peaceful and alone, but I knew I had to be careful because there were wild animals in the forest. I tried to sleep, but my mind was racing. I kept thinking about the sounds of the forest and what I would do if I saw a bear. Suddenly, I heard a loud snap. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I listened intently, but I couldn't hear anything else. A few minutes later, I heard the snap again. This time, it was closer. I grabbed my flashlight and turned it on. I slowly scanned the area around my tent, but I couldn't see anything. I started to feel scared. I knew that there were bears in the forest, and I didn't want to run into one. I decided to stay in my tent for the rest of the night. I lay down in my sleeping bag and tried to sleep, but I couldn't. I kept thinking about the sound I had heard. I was sure that something was out there, watching me. I heard the snap again, and this time, it was right outside my tent. I held my breath and waited. I could hear something breathing. It was heavy and raspy. I knew it was a bear. I was terrified. I closed my eyes and waited for the bear to attack. But the bear didn't attack. It just stood outside my tent for a few minutes and then it went away. I lay in bed for the rest of the night, too scared to sleep. I was relieved when the sun came up. I packed up my tent and left the campsite as quickly as I could. I never went camping alone again. When I was 12 years old, my best friend, Ethan, and I were inseparable. We spent every summer together, exploring the woods behind our houses, building forts, and telling ghost stories. One summer, Ethan's parents decided to send him to Camp Evergreen, a sleepaway camp nestled deep in the heart of the woods. I was devastated to be left behind, but I knew it would be a good experience for Ethan. A few weeks later, I was visiting Ethan at camp when he told me about a creepy old shack he had found in the woods. He said it was abandoned and looked like it had been there for centuries. He was eager to explore it, but I was hesitant. I had heard stories about a deranged prisoner who had escaped from a nearby prison and was rumored to be hiding in the woods. That night, after everyone was asleep, Ethan and I snuck out of the camp and headed into the woods. The shack was just as Ethan had described it, old and shrouded in mystery. We approached cautiously, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The door creaked open as we pushed it, revealing a dark, dusty interior. We stepped inside, our hearts pounding in our chests. The shack was filled with strange symbols carved into the walls and floor. They were unlike anything we had ever seen before. We explored the room, wondering who had carved these symbols and what they meant. Suddenly, we heard a noise from the back of the shack. It sounded like a growl. We froze, our flashlights trembling in our hands. The growl came again, closer this time. We could feel a presence in the room with us, something watching us from the shadows. We tried to run, but the door slammed shut behind us, plunging us into darkness. We fumbled for the doorknob, but it was stuck. We were trapped. Footsteps echoed through the shack, growing louder with each passing moment. We could hear the creature breathing, its breath heavy and raspy. We huddled together in a corner, our fear mounting. The creature emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing red in the darkness. It was tall and gaunt, with long fingers. It raised its hand towards us, its claws glinting in the moonlight. We screamed, but no one could hear us. We were alone in the shack, at the mercy of this monstrous creature. Just as it was about to attack, a blinding light filled the shack. We shielded our eyes as the creature hissed and retreated into the shadows. The light faded, and we were left in darkness once more. We cautiously opened the door and stumbled out of the shack, not daring to look back. We ran through the woods, not stopping until we reached the safety of the camp. We never told anyone about what we had seen that night. We knew that no one would believe us. The creature from the shack remained our secret, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked in the heart of the woods. Me and my friends, Emily, Ben, and Jesse were looking for a hidden campsite that we had heard about from a local ranger. It was supposed to be a special place where we could find peace and quiet away from the city life. As we walked through the thick bushes, the air got cooler and the only sounds were the occasional snap of a twig or the chirp of a bird. It was like the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something bad to happen. We finally got to the campsite just when it was getting dark. It was a clearing in the middle of a group of big oak trees, with a small stream running through it. We set up our tents quickly and gathered around a crackling campfire, the flames dancing and casting shadows on our faces. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories, enjoying the simple pleasures of being in nature. But as the night went on, we started to feel uneasy. The forest, once a place of peace, now seemed to have a hidden danger. The only sounds were the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustle of leaves, and each sound sent a shiver down our spines. Then, suddenly, a scream broke the silence. We froze, our hearts pounding in our chests. The scream came right behind our tents. We looked at each other, scared of what we might find. We grabbed our flashlights and slowly made our way towards the stream. The air got colder as we got closer, and the only sound was the beating of our hearts. When we got to the edge of the clearing, we gasped in horror. There was a figure lying on the ground next to the stream, its body twisted in a strange way. We rushed to the figure, but it was too late. The person was dead, their face frozen in a mask of fear. We didn't know who they were or how they died, but we knew we had to get out of there. We packed up our tents as fast as we could, our hands shaking with fear. We didn't dare look back as we ran into the darkness, the forest closing in around us like a living blanket. We ran for what seemed like hours, our lungs burning and our legs aching. Finally, we got to the park entrance and fell to the ground, exhausted and scared. We had made it out alive, but the memory of that night would haunt us forever. The next day, we told the police what had happened. They were shocked and immediately started an investigation. They searched the forest for clues, but they didn't find anything. They interviewed us and the other campers in the area, but no one had seen anything suspicious. The case went cold, and the killer was never found. But the police never gave up hope. They continued to investigate, hoping for a break in the case. One day, a few years later, the police got a tip. A hunter had found a hidden cache of weapons in the forest. The police analyzed the weapons and found DNA that matched the DNA of the killer. The police finally had their suspect. They tracked him down and arrested him. He confessed to the murder and was sentenced to life in prison. The case was finally closed, and the killer was brought to justice. But the memory of that night would always stay with us. We would never forget the scream in the forest, or the fear that we felt.